When a nun's desperate prayers meet the steely resolve of Clint Eastwood, you know something unforgettable is about to unfold. It was dusk in the dusty town of Redemption Ridge, a place where hope came as rarely as rain and danger lingered like an unwelcome shadow. The sun hung low on the horizon, casting long streaks of orange across the cracked dirt roads. Somewhere beyond the edge of town, Sister Mary Clare knelt by a broken-down wagon, clutching her rosary beads tightly in trembling hands. "Please, Lord," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I can't do this alone." Behind her lay 3 unconscious bandits sprawled across the ground, their weapons scattered around them. She had managed to fend them off with sheer determination and a well-placed rock to one man's temple, but now exhaustion weighed heavy on her shoulders. Her habit was torn, her arms scratched from the struggle, but what frightened her most wasn't the physical pain. It was the knowledge that more bandits could be coming, and when they did, there would be no miracle strong enough to save her. That's when he appeared. A lone figure emerged from the haze of dust kicked up by the wind. He wore a dark duster coat that billowed behind him like a cape, his boots crunching against the gravel beneath his feet. His hat shaded his eyes, but even so, Sister Mary Clare felt his piercing gaze lock onto hers. This wasn't just any drifter passing through. This was someone who carried authority in every step he took. "You look like you've been through hell," he said, his voice gravelly yet calm. There was no judgment in his tone, only observation. Sister Mary Clare blinked, unsure whether to trust him or run. But running wasn't an option anymore. Taking a deep breath, she reached up and let him pull her onto the horse behind him. As they rode away from the scene, she couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter was only the beginning of something far greater and far more dangerous than either of them could imagine. Little did they know, the bandits weren't working alone. They were part of a larger gang led by a ruthless outlaw named Kane, whose name struck fear into the hearts of anyone who dared cross him. And once Victor found out what happened to his men, he wouldn't stop until he made sure both Clint Eastwood and Sister Mary Clare paid dearly. But for now, all Sister Mary Clare could think about was the warmth of Clint's back against her hands and the steady rhythm of the horse beneath them. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to feel a flicker of hope. What neither of them realized, however, was how deeply intertwined their fates truly were, and how the choices they made next would change not only their lives, but the entire town of Redemption Ridge forever. As Clint Eastwood and Sister Mary Clare galloped through the rugged terrain, the tension between them grew palpable. Neither spoke, each lost in their own thoughts. The silence was broken only by the rhythmic pounding of hooves against the hard-packed earth and the occasional whistle of the wind slicing through the canyon walls. Finally, Sister Mary Clare broke the quiet. "Why are you helping me?" she asked, her voice tinged with both gratitude and suspicion. "You don't even know me." Clint glanced over his shoulder briefly, his jaw tightening. His piercing blue-gray eyes seemed to weigh her question before he answered. "Let's just say I've seen enough bad men ruin good people," he replied curtly. "Figured I'd tip the scales a little." His answer left her wanting more, but she sensed pressing him further wouldn't yield anything useful, at least not yet. Instead, she focused on the landscape ahead, trying to ignore the gnawing fear in her stomach. Every shadow seemed to move. Every rustle of leaves sounded like footsteps. Were they being followed? Her fears weren't unfounded. Back at the site of the ambush, Kane stood towering over his tied-up men, his face contorted with rage. His black leather gloves creaked as he clenched his fists, and his cold, calculating eyes scanned the area. "What happened here?" he demanded, his voice low and dangerous. One of the bandits groaned, struggling to sit up despite his injuries. It was him," the bandit stuttered, wincing as pain shot through his ribs. "That guy, the one everyone talks about. Clint Eastwood." Victor's eyes narrowed, his lips curling into a cruel smile. Clint Eastwood, huh? He turned to the rest of his gang, who stood nervously nearby. Find them. Bring me the girl, and Clint Eastwood. Alive. The command sent shivers down everyone's spines. No one wanted to be on the receiving end of Victor's wrath if they failed. Meanwhile, Clint and Sister Mary Clare arrived at an abandoned cabin nestled deep within the forest. It was small and weathered, its wooden planks warped from years of neglect, but it offered shelter and safety for the night. Clint tethered the horses outside while Sister Mary Clare stepped cautiously inside, her eyes adjusting to the dim light filtering through the cracks in the walls. "This will have to do," Clint said simply, brushing past her to inspect the space. He moved methodically, checking for signs of recent occupation or traps. Satisfied, he lit a lantern and set it on a rickety table in the center of the room. For the first time since their escape, Sister Mary Clare allowed herself to relax, if only slightly. She sank onto a wooden chair, cradling her head in her hands. "Thank you," she murmured softly. "I don't know what I would have done without your help." Clint leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching her carefully. "Don't thank me yet," he said grimly. "Those men work for someone bigger. Someone who won't stop until he finds us." Her heart sank. "Who?" "Victor Kane," Clint replied, his tone flat but laced with warning. "He runs this territory like it's his personal kingdom. Cross him, and you're signing your own death warrant." Sister Mary Clare swallowed hard. "Why does he want me?" "That's what we need to figure out," Clint admitted. "But whatever it is, it's big enough to send his men after you. Which means we're not safe. Not anywhere." The gravity of their situation settled over them like a suffocating blanket. Outside, the wind howled mournfully, adding to the eerie atmosphere. Sister Mary Clare looked at Clint, searching for reassurance in his hardened features. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. "We keep moving," he said firmly. "First thing tomorrow, we head east. There's an old mining town called Silver Hollow about 30 miles from here. If we can make it there, we might stand a chance." "But why Silver Hollow?" she pressed. "It's remote," Clint explained. "Hard to reach unless you know the trails. Plus, there's someone there who owes me a favor. Might be able to give us some answers, or at least a way out of this mess." Sister Mary Clare nodded slowly, though doubt lingered in her expression. "And if Victor catches up to us before then?" Clint's lips curled into a faint smirk, though it lacked humor. "Then we fight." The simplicity of his response unnerved her, but she forced herself to push aside her fears. Whatever lay ahead, she knew one thing for certain. She couldn't face it alone. And for reasons she couldn't fully understand, she trusted Clint Eastwood, even if trusting him meant putting her life in his hands. Unbeknownst to them, however, Victor Kane's men were already closing in. Hidden among the trees, two riders watched the cabin intently, their silhouettes barely visible in the fading light. One of them raised a pair of binoculars, confirming their target. "They're here," the rider muttered into a walkie-talkie. "Tell Kane we've got them cornered." Back at his hideout, Victor smiled cruelly, lighting a cigar with deliberate slowness. "Good," he purred. "Now let's see how long they last." The game was far from over, and the stakes were higher than ever. The night was eerily silent, save for the occasional creak of the cabin's old wooden beams and the distant hoot of an owl. Inside, Sister Mary Clare sat by the flickering lantern light, her fingers absently tracing the edge of her rosary beads. Clint paced near the door, his hand resting on the butt of his revolver, every muscle in his body coiled like a spring ready to snap. "They're out there," he muttered under his breath, more to himself than to her. "I can feel it." Sister Mary Clare looked up, startled. "What do you mean?" Clint didn't answer immediately. Instead, He moved to the window, peering through a crack between the boards nailed across it. The darkness outside was impenetrable, but years of living on the edge had taught him to trust his instincts, and right now they were screaming danger. "They're watching us," he said finally, turning back to face her. His expression was grim, his voice low and urgent. "Victor doesn't waste time. If his men are close enough to track us here, they'll strike soon." Her heart raced at his words. But why would they wait? Why not attack now? "Because they want to wear us down first," Clint replied, his tone matter-of-fact. "Make us think we're safe. Let us drop our guard. Then they'll hit hard and fast when we least expect it." Sister Mary Clare felt a chill run down her spine. She wasn't used to this kind of life, this constant tension, the ever-present threat of violence lurking just beyond the shadows. Back at the convent, her days had been filled with prayer, charity work, and quiet reflection. Now, she found herself thrust into a world where survival depended on split-second decisions and raw instinct. It was terrifying, but also strangely exhilarating. "What do we do?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly despite her best efforts to stay calm. "We prepare," Clint said simply. He grabbed a piece of chalk from his saddlebag and began drawing lines on the floor around the perimeter of the room. "These marks will help me keep track of anyone who tries to sneak in, and if they come through the windows or doors." He gestured toward the table, where he'd placed several makeshift weapons, a hunting knife, a length of chain, and a heavy iron skillet. "We fight dirty." She stared at the crude arsenal, feeling both overwhelmed and oddly empowered. For the first time since their escape, she realized that she couldn't rely solely on Clint to protect her. She needed to contribute, to stand her ground, no matter how scared she was. "I'll do whatever it takes," she said firmly, meeting his gaze. "Tell me what to do." Clint studied her for a moment, surprised by the steel in her voice. There was something about this woman, a quiet strength beneath her gentle exterior, that reminded him of someone he once knew, someone he'd failed to save. Shaking off the memory, he nodded. "First thing tomorrow, we fortify this place as much as we can," he instructed. "Block the windows, reinforce the door. We'll need supplies too, food, water, ammunition. I saw a stream not far from here. We can fill some containers before dawn. And tonight," she pressed. "Tonight, we sleep in shifts," he said. "One of us stays awake while the other rests. That way, we're always ready." Though neither of them voiced it, the unspoken truth hung heavy in the air. Tonight might be their last chance to rest before the storm hit. Hours passed in tense silence. Clint took the first watch, perched near the door with his gun drawn. Sister Mary Clare lay on the floor, wrapped in a thin blanket, though sleep eluded her. Every sound, the rustle of leaves, the distant howl of a coyote, made her heart leap into her throat. But eventually, exhaustion overtook her, and she drifted into a fitful slumber. It was just after midnight when the attack came. At first, it was subtle, a faint scraping noise against the side of the cabin, barely audible over the wind. Clint's eyes snapped open, his senses instantly alert. He rose silently, moving to the window to investigate. Through the cracks, he could see shadows darting between the trees. They were closing in. "Wake up," he hissed, shaking Sister Mary Clare gently but urgently. She bolted upright, wide-eyed and disoriented. "They're here," Clint whispered. "Stay behind me and do exactly as I say." Before she could respond, the front door burst open with a deafening crash. 2 bandits charged in, brandishing rifles and shouting curses. Clint reacted instantly, firing 2 quick shots that dropped one assailant where he stood. The second man lunged forward, swinging wildly with a machete. Clint sidestepped the blow, driving his elbow into the man's jaw with brutal precision. The bandit crumpled to the floor, unconscious. More shouts erupted from outside as reinforcements poured in. Bullets tore through the walls, splintering wood and sending shards flying. Sister Mary Clare ducked behind the overturned table, clutching the iron skillet tightly. Her mind raced. What had Clint told her? Fight dirty. Think fast. When another bandit kicked the door open, she swung the skillet with all her might, catching him square in the temple. He staggered backward, stunned, giving Clint the opening he needed to disarm him. Together they fought back to back, their movements synchronized despite having never trained together. But the odds were stacked against them. More bandits flooded the cabin, forcing Clint and Sister Mary Clare into a desperate retreat. They scrambled out the back door, sprinting into the forest as gunfire echoed behind them. Branches whipped at their faces, roots threatened to trip them, but they pushed forward, driven by sheer adrenaline. Finally, they reached the stream Clint had mentioned earlier. Crouching behind a cluster of rocks, they caught their breath, listening intently for signs of pursuit. "They won't stop," Sister Mary Clare panted, her chest heaving. "Not until they've killed us." "No," Clint agreed, reloading his revolver with steady hands. "But we've got one advantage they don't." "What's that?" "They underestimate you." His words ignited a spark within her. For so long she'd seen herself as weak, helpless, a burden to those trying to protect her. But tonight she'd proven otherwise. She'd held her own in a fight, contributed to their survival. Maybe, just maybe, she was stronger than she thought. "We need to get to Silver Hollow," Clint continued. "If we can make it there, we might have a shot." "But how?" she asked. "They'll be waiting for us." A slow, dangerous smile spread across Clint's face. "Then we give them something else to chase." By dawn, the plan was set. Using supplies scavenged from the cabin, they rigged a series of traps along the trail leading away from the stream. False tracks, tripwires, and decoys designed to lure Victor's men into ambushes. Meanwhile, Clint and Sister Mary Clare doubled back, taking a hidden route through the dense underbrush. As expected, the bandits fell for the ruse. Explosions of dirt and debris marked their progress as they triggered the traps, their frustrated shouts echoing through the forest. Clint and Sister Mary Clare pressed on, moving swiftly and silently. But even as they gained distance, Sister Mary Clare couldn't shake the feeling that they were being led into an even greater confrontation. Victor Kane wasn't the type to give up easily, and sooner or later they'd have to face him head-on. 3 days later, they arrived at Silver Hollow, or what was left of it. The mining town was little more than a ghost town now, its buildings crumbling and abandoned. But nestled among the ruins was a saloon still standing, its faded sign reading the Lucky Strike. This was where Clint's contact supposedly waited. Pushing open the creaky double doors, they stepped inside. The interior was dimly lit, the air thick with the scent of stale whiskey and cigarette smoke. At the bar sat a wiry man with greying hair and a scruffy beard, nursing a glass of bourbon. When he saw Clint, his eyes widened in recognition. "Clint Eastwood," the man drawled, setting down his drink. "Never thought I'd see you again." "Mac," Clint greeted him curtly. "We need your help." Mac raised an eyebrow, glancing at Sister Mary Clare. "And who's the nun?" "That's none of your concern," Clint snapped. "Right now, all you need to know is that Victor Kane's breathing down our necks. If you've got any favors left to repay, now's the time." Mac hesitated, clearly torn. Finally, he sighed and motioned for them to follow him into a back room. There, he revealed a map of the surrounding area, marked with various routes and landmarks. "There's an old mine shaft about 5 miles north of here," he explained. "Collapsed years ago, but there's a tunnel system underneath that leads straight to Redemption Ridge. You use that, and you might just slip past Kane's men unnoticed. Clint nodded, studying the map carefully. Good. What else? Mac leaned in closer, lowering his voice. Word is, Kane's planning something big. Something involving the church in Redemption Ridge. Don't know what, but it's got everyone spooked. Sister Mary Clare's blood ran cold. The church. Of course. Whatever Victor wanted, it had to do with her faith, with everything she held sacred. She clenched her fists, determination burning in her eyes. We have to stop him, she said fiercely. Clint glanced at her, then back at Mac. Looks like we've got our mission. As they prepared to leave, Mac stopped Clint with a hand on his shoulder. Be careful, kid, he warned. Kane's not the same man you remember. He's worse. Clint's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. He already knew the risks. What he didn't know was whether they'd survive long enough to take them. Outside, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the desolate landscape. Somewhere in the distance, the faint sound of hoofbeats signaled that Victor's men were closing in. The final showdown was inevitable, and it would test them in ways neither could have imagined. The mine shaft was darker than anything Sister Mary Clare had ever experienced. It wasn't just the absence of light. It was the oppressive weight of the earth pressing down on them, the suffocating silence broken only by the occasional drip of water echoing through the tunnels. Clint led the way, his lantern casting flickering shadows that danced along the jagged walls. Behind him, Sister Mary Clare followed closely, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and resolve. This tunnel better lead where Mac said it does, she muttered under her breath, clutching the strap of her satchel tightly. Inside were supplies scavenged from the Lucky Strike, dried food, a canteen of water, and a small revolver Clint insisted she carry. She didn't like the idea of using it, but after their encounter with Victor's men, she understood the necessity. It will, Clint replied without looking back. His voice carried an edge of certainty, though his grip on the lantern betrayed the tension in his body. He knew as well as she did that one wrong turn could mean disaster. These old mines were notorious for collapses, dead ends, and hidden pitfalls. But they had no choice. Above ground, Victor Kane's men were closing in. Below, at least, they stood a chance of slipping past unnoticed. 4 hours, they trudged through the labyrinthine passages, navigating twists and turns that seemed designed to confuse intruders. The air grew colder and damper the deeper they went, until Sister Mary Clare's breath came out in visible puffs. Her legs ached, her feet blistered, but she refused to complain. This was her fight now, not just Clint's, and she wouldn't let exhaustion slow her down. Finally, they reached a fork in the tunnel. To the left, the path sloped downward into darkness, so complete it felt like staring into oblivion. To the right, a faint glimmer of natural light filtered through cracks in the ceiling ahead. That's our exit, Clint said, nodding toward the light. But we're not alone. Sister Mary Clare froze. What do you mean? He pointed silently to the ground. There, in the dust, were fresh footprints, boot prints, unmistakably human. Someone else had been here recently, and given the circumstances, there was only one likely explanation. Victor's men, she whispered, dread pooling in her stomach. Clint nodded grimly. They must have figured out about the tunnels too. Let's move quickly, but quietly. As they crept forward, the sound of voices drifted toward them, muffled but distinct. 2 men, arguing about something. Clint signaled for Sister Mary Clare to stay put while he scouted ahead. She obeyed reluctantly, hugging the wall as he disappeared around the bend. Moments later, he returned, his expression taut. 2 guards, armed. They're stationed near the exit. Her eyes widened. Can we sneak past them? Not without risking detection, he admitted. We'll have to take them out. She swallowed hard, the weight of what he was suggesting settling heavily on her shoulders. Are you sure? I'm sure, he said firmly. Stay low, follow my lead, and don't hesitate if things go sideways. With that, he moved forward, his footsteps silent against the rocky floor. Sister Mary Clare trailed behind, her pulse racing. When they rounded the corner, the two bandits came into view, leaning casually against the tunnel walls. One smoked a cigarette, its orange glow illuminating his face. The other fiddled with a knife, twirling it absent-mindedly between his fingers. Clint acted first, lunging forward with startling speed. Before either man could react, he slammed the butt of his revolver into the smoker's temple, sending him crumpling to the ground. The second bandit spun around, raising his knife, but Clint disarmed him with a swift kick to the wrist. A sharp punch to the jaw finished the job, leaving both men unconscious. Let's go, Clint urged, grabbing Sister Mary Clare's arm and pulling her toward the exit. They emerged into the cool night air, blinking against the sudden brightness of the moonlit landscape. Ahead lay Redemption Ridge, its silhouette stark against the horizon. The sight filled Sister Mary Clare with conflicting emotions, relief at being so close to home, and terror at what awaited them there. By the time they reached the outskirts of town, dawn was breaking. The streets were eerily quiet, the townsfolk either asleep or too afraid to venture outside. Clint and Sister Mary Clare moved cautiously, sticking to the shadows as they made their way toward the church. When they arrived, the scene before them stopped them in their tracks. Victor Kane stood in the center of the courtyard, flanked by a dozen armed men. In front of him, tied to a wooden post, was Father O'Connell, the elderly priest who had served Redemption Ridge for decades. His face was bruised, his robes torn, but his eyes burned with defiance. "You shouldn't have come back, sister," Victor sneered, spotting her immediately. His voice was smooth, almost conversational, but laced with venom. "This doesn't have to end badly. For you, at least." Sister Mary Clare stepped forward, her chin lifted defiantly. "Let him go, Victor. He has nothing to do with this." "Oh, but he does," Victor countered, circling the post like a predator stalking its prey. "You see, your dear father here knows something valuable. Something I need." "What are you talking about?" she demanded, her voice shaking despite her efforts to remain calm. Victor smiled cruelly. "The relic. The one buried beneath the altar. Hand it over, and I'll let you all walk away unharmed." Her blood ran cold. The relic, a centuries-old artifact said to hold divine power, was indeed hidden beneath the church. But it was more than just a religious symbol. It represented faith, hope, and everything the people of Redemption Ridge held sacred. Giving it to Victor would be tantamount to surrendering their souls. "We'll never give it to you," she spat, stepping closer. "You'll have to kill us first." Victor chuckled darkly. "If that's what it takes." Before he could issue another command, chaos erupted. Gunfire rang out as Clint opened fire on Victor's men, taking several down before they could react. Sister Mary Clare seized the opportunity, rushing to Father O'Connell's side and cutting his bonds with a knife she'd taken from one of the fallen bandits. "Get inside," Clint shouted, ducking behind cover as bullets whizzed past. "I'll hold them off." "No," Sister Mary Clare yelled back. "We're doing this together." For a moment, their eyes locked, and Clint saw the same steely determination in her gaze that had driven him to keep fighting all these years. Nodding sharply, he joined her at the church doors, firing blindly into the fray to cover their retreat. Inside, Father O'Connell staggered to his feet, clutching a Bible to his chest. "The relic," he gasped. "It's in the crypt." "Show us," Clint ordered, reloading his revolver. Together, The three of them descended into the bowels of the church, emerging moments later in the dimly lit crypt. There, nestled within a stone alcove, was the relic, a golden cross encrusted with jewels, radiating an otherworldly glow. Victor burst into the room moments later, his gun trained on Sister Mary Clare. "Hand it over," he growled. "Now." Instead of complying, she stepped forward, holding the cross high above her head. "This belongs to God," she declared, her voice ringing with conviction. "And you'll never touch it." With that, she smashed the cross against the stone floor, shattering it into pieces. Light exploded outward, blinding everyone in the room. When the brilliance faded, Victor and his men were gone, vanished as if they'd never existed. In the aftermath, Redemption Ridge began to heal. The townsfolk, inspired by Sister Mary Clare's bravery, rallied together to rebuild what Victor Kane had sought to destroy. Though the relic was lost, its spirit lived on in the hearts of those who refused to surrender their faith. As for Clint Eastwood, he prepared to leave. His work here was done, and the open road called to him once more. But before he could depart, Sister Mary Clare approached him, her expression soft yet resolute. "Thank you," she said simply, "for everything." Clint tipped his hat, a rare smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Just doing my part, sister. Take care of yourself." And with that, he mounted his horse and rode off into the horizon, leaving behind a legacy of courage and redemption. Sister Mary Clare watched him go, her heart swelling with gratitude and admiration. She knew their paths might never cross again, but she also knew that the bond they'd forged would stay with her forever. Because sometimes, even in the darkest of times, heroes rise when you least expect them. And sometimes, those heroes save not just lives, but souls. Glowing, did you love this epic tale of Clint Eastwood saving a nun from bandits? Show some love. Red heart. Backhand index pointing right like if you were hooked by the suspense and drama. Thumbs up. Speech balloon share with friends who love thrilling adventures. Tractor dashing away. Bell subscribe for more epic tales like this one. Open book sparkles. Don't forget to leave a comment below. What was your favorite moment? Let us know. Raising hands fire.